Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 3M Open Data Dive Show. We have a lot to cover. Of course, the prior 3M tournaments to figure out which players generally play best here and who should we target for our wagers and DFS lineups for this week's slate. We have a forecast to check, just a lot of things to cover, so let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where normally I post some research around the tournament of the week. I got to looking at the 3M, and even for a data nerd like myself, I could not find too many patterns for the previous winners of the 3M. Not a lot tying them together. So at the end of the show this evening, I will present to you what I was able to find. It just did not narrow the field down very much this week. So did not post anything for the 3M this week. But if you want to see usually the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contest I play. Certainly fired off a few names at prices that I liked today for the 3M. So again, if you want to see those pieces of information, that comes out every Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show. So give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation. Continues to update you throughout the week with his own version of recent form, course history. And if you're a subscriber to his article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night as we continue the DFS talk over there. Talk about game theory and favorite areas of the price board, players we're nervously fading, some sneaky low-owned plays, pivots, all that. If you want to continue the DFS talk after calls, then I highly suggest that you subscribe to that article. It is free to do, and go show him some support. Follow him over on social media. Lastly, we're live. Chat's open. Love to hear from you all. In addition to anything from the Open that you want to finalize from last week, and then moving forward to the 3M. Did you look at the price board? Who are some of your favorites? Who are you targeting early this week? And all of that. So feel free to jump into chat or into the comments. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2024 3M Open. And we start, as we always do, on a Monday evening over at the extended forecast over at Windfinder. Again, we are in Blaine, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis-St. Paul. Maybe not technically a suburb. It's maybe 10, 15 miles north of it. But anyway, the forecast looks pretty chaotic for Blaine this week. Thursday looks fine. Very little wind. High of 77 looks great. Then it looks like it's going to get hot, but windy. You see the sustained winds jump into the teens on Friday with gusts into the 20s. And then Saturday, if this forecast holds, we look like we could get maybe gusts into the 30s on Saturday. But if this forecast were to hold, it does look like wind is going to be a pretty big deal this week at TPC Twin Cities, which means the course might play a little bit more difficult than what we are generally accustomed to at TPC Twin Cities. Of course, with this forecast being so far away from the start of the tournament, we're not going to look at any kind of wave advantage or anything like that yet. We'll cover that Wednesday night. But at least for now, it does look like there will be a substantial amount of wind during the tournament. So with that, we're going to move to Fantasy National. And because of that forecast we just looked at, in moderate and windy conditions in the past 2 years, our top performers have been Sahith Theegala, Sam Burns, Harry Hall, Patrick Rogers, Carson Young, Andrew Novak, Adam Schenk, Akshay Bhatia, Sam Stevens, and Dylan Wu. You'll notice that quite a few players have some stars. There have been more field changes today. Last night, Mark Hubbard and Aaron Rye were the two field changes from the weekend. Earlier today, Justin Rose, Lucas Glover, and Richie Werenski also withdrew or dropped out from playing the 3M Open. So make sure you make a note of that in any wager considerations or in early builds of lineup making, that these 5 players have withdrawn. And I would not be surprised if we see a few more by the time Wednesday rolls around. But with that, again, there's a look at our top wind performers. I don't like the long course filter. As I mentioned last night, and I'll mention again briefly, this course sits a decent amount above sea level, so the ball will travel. The course will not play to its stated 7,430 yards. It generally plays much shorter than that due to elevation. I'm not ready to think this is going to be difficult by any stretch. If we look at the historic conditions, when the winds really picked up in 2021, it played to average. This is the year Cam Champ won with a final score of minus 15, which is the worst that it's been. 2022, we had a little bit of wind as well with Tony Finau, and it played difficult, but even so, we still had a round that was easy in moderate winds. He got to 17. So if anything, I'm thinking this is probably going to be average this year, would be my guess. But that's just a guess. This could very well play difficult with all of the wind, all of the water on the course in combination with the wind and whatnot. So if I'm thinking it's going to play average, I generally don't use this filter. I only like this filter when it's easy or when it's difficult. So let's do a couple of quick reminders, I guess is the best way to do that. I need to remove the windy filter, so apologies there. Let's just clear all. That was weird. Okay, last 24. We're going to look at a few shot types here, mainly the off the tee and the approach. In the last 3 months, so in the immediacy, the players who are just in great form right now, your top off the tee players in the past 3 months have been Luke Clanton, Kevin Doherty, Keith Mitchell, Johnny Vegas, Patrick Fishburne, Akshay Bhatia, Rico Hoey, Cam Champ, Alejandro Tosti, and Sam Stevens. And then your top approach players have been Tony Finau, Kevin Yu, Keith Mitchell, David Lipsky, Chan Kim, Ben Griffin, Troy Merritt, Tom Hoagie, JJ Spawn, and Matt Walsh. So I mentioned this a little bit last night, put a pretty big star next to Keith Mitchell in terms of the ball striking. He's just been excellent in off the tee and approach in the past 3 months. Putting is quite a different story, as you can tell. But, some pretty good honorable mentions here. Luke Clanton, 1st and 13th. Joel Damon, 14th and 17th, much like Keith Mitchell. Ball striking it very well. The putter is close your eyes and pray bad. Let's see. Eckroat has been pretty good in the ball striking. Bhatia, of course. So quite a few players here that have been pretty exceptional in both of the ball striking categories. The only other thing we're going to look at before we move rather quickly over to prior leaderboards is putting. We're going to look at putting on fast and lightning bent greens. If we look at the historic conditions again, just very quickly, 2 rounds of fast, 2 rounds of lightning. Last year we had 3 rounds of lightning in 2022. Before that they were fast. So these are definitely going to be at least fast. But the past couple of years they have been sped up quite a bit. So we are going to look at fast and lightning bent greens. It also makes sense too with the amount of wind that you can see the greens potentially getting baked out, firming up and whatnot as well. So on fast and lightning bent greens in the past 2 years, and I'll expand this to 36 rounds just so we have enough of a sample size. In the past 2 years on fast and lightning bent greens, our top putters have been JT Poston, Keegan, Aaron Baddeley, Harry Hall, Matt Wallace, Chesson Hadley, Sahith Theegala, Paul Barjon, Austin Cook, and Adam Hadwin. Specifically on fast and lightning bent greens. Okay, I know we jumped through the off the tee, the approach, and the putting. We'll take a quick look at the prior leaderboards, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to do anything with the around the green. That's why we started with this. So I'm actually just going to get this prepped for the fairways and greens. But let's start looking at some of these prior leaderboards from the 3M and figure out the types of players, what metrics generally have played well over the years. So we look at last year and Lee Hodges' win. We highlight all the way down to the top 19 just due to ties. Not very many players negative off the tee. Not very many players negative in approach. More so in the approach, which is a little surprising. Now, don't get carried away with only seeing 2 players negative and around the green. There's not a lot to be gained here. 3.5 actually is the highest that I see of the players that finished in the top 19. If we sort on the around the green, the highest is actually in fact at 3.7. So you have a decent bit of kind of cut making here, a miscut, but nothing truly standout other than maybe Tony Finau from last year. Whereas if you look at off the tee, gaining 6, 4.5, 4, several 3.5s. There's a lot to be gained here off the tee. Players are going to have to be accurate, for one, because of all of the trouble that lurks 15 holes with water in play. Just put it that way. So there is very big potential for reloads off the tee. But players are going to need a little bit of distance too. It's going to be helped with the elevation, sure, but distance certainly isn't a bad thing. And look at a couple of the past winners: Tony Finau, Cam Champ, Matthew Wolff won the inaugural 3M. He was certainly long off the tee. So distance and accuracy is going to matter. That's why we're looking at off the tee. You look at the approach. I mean, your winner led in last year's tournament, a top 10, a runner up. You have a lot of cut making up here. I mean, iron play is just very, very necessary around TPC Twin Cities. And if we look at Tony Finau's win from 2 years ago, we're going to see a lot of similar type things. We'll just look at the top 15 here. Only a couple players negative off the tee. Again, not a whole lot negative in around the green, but the highest number is at 3.9. He actually might have led. Okay, so there was a 4.1 and a 4. But look, you had a couple of miscuts. Very high in around the green. Around the green is just not a big deal here at TPC Twin Cities. And Sid, look at the off the tee. Runner up. Oh yeah, sure, middling from Troy Merritt, who just did not make a putt that week at all. Your winner was third and off the tee. Top 10, top 5, top 10, top 20, top 10. Huge amounts of correlation here in the off the tee and in the approach. Top 5, top 20, win, top 20. All of this cut making. I mean, you have to scroll down a decent bit before you find your first miscut from a player on the approach leaderboard. And then, of course, the putting. You need players that will spike and just make putts. But again, these greens aren't difficult to read, so I'm not sure how much I want to factor in putting. I mean, Tony Finau, not generally a good putter. He gained 1. Look at Griot. Griot is not a good putter. He gained 4 2 years ago. Tom Hoagie, not a good putter. He was field average. So it can help. That's why we looked at fast and lightning bent greens. But I am much, much more focused on the players who are going to be putting themselves in position with good off the tee and great iron play. Let's go ahead and go to the fairways and greens from last year. We, again, sort on... Yeah, we'll just do the top 19. I know the bottom couple might be just slightly off your screen. Most of these players are positive in distance, not by a whole lot, granted, but most of these players are positive in distance. Fairways generally don't matter because these fairways are pretty darn wide, so long as you're not so wayward you're finding the water. These fairways are fairly wide, I believe 31 yards wide in landing zones. What you will see, though, is good drives and greens, but I'm a little hesitant with that because greens are pretty easy to hit. And even though there's a lot of correlation here with these greens, these numbers are small. I mean, there's a lot of tournaments we'll see greens be in the double digits or nines. You know, the leader was an 8. You got a missed cut from Lucas Glover, who I imagine probably just didn't putt well. You do have a decent bit of a correlation here, but there's not a lot of huge numbers in here. Again, we're accustomed to seeing double digits and 9s and 8s as opposed to 6s and 5s. So there's not a whole lot here. Good drives, okay, I suppose. You had a couple of players, or one player, I should say, very good in good drives with Matty Schmid, but otherwise kind of fell off a little bit. So I'm really not sure what to think in this page view. We look at Tony Finau's win from a couple years ago. A little bit less in terms of distance. More players were negative down here. But more players hitting greens. If we sort on it, it falls off a little bit. Last year's distance was much more than 2022. Fairways, a couple of high missed cuts and some really, really poor finishes. You know, a couple of middling to clunkers. Good drives. Okay, good drives is fairly solid other than Troy Merritt up here. Top 20, first. Top 10, top 5, top 20, win. Good drives is pretty solid there. This is what I'm accustomed to seeing in the greens. You see all that there. So perhaps last year was a little bit of an outlier in terms of good drives and greens. Let's take a look at 2021 and Cam Champ's win. Just very quickly. See if we can't break this tie. Distance, again, a much bigger factor for the upper echelon. A lot in the greens. Only one player negative in good drives. My initial thought was good drives. But I can be talked out of that. So as we move to the players in the field this week, I think we'll take a look at a couple of these, namely probably good drives. I'm just trying to think if I want to include a filter. I definitely don't want to use the long course filter for reasons we talked about. We could look at moderate and windy conditions, but I generally like just using that as a strokes gained total to see who just generally plays well in the wind. This is an Arnold Palmer design, so no architect filter. Again, I think this is just going to play much more average than difficult. So, yeah, I guess let's just kind of see who's been hitting good drives in the immediacy. And that's what I found with the research today. There wasn't a whole lot connecting 3M. There hasn't been a lot of consistency, it seems, in these 5 years. So in the past 3 months or 24 rounds, your top good drives gained players have been Carson Young, Luke Clanton, Joel Damon, Ben Coles, Grayson Sigg, Matt Wallace, Akshay Bhatia, Chan Kim, and Austin Eckroat and Patrick Fishburne are your top 10. Most of these players are pretty darn solid in greens. The exception of Austin Eckroat is kind of middling. You see with these good drives, a lot of these players are much more in the fairways portion, with the exception of Matt Wallace. He was not really high in distance either. His irons have just been very good lately. okay. Something we could, I guess, maybe think of, because this rough is long, if you do happen to find the rough, 4 inches long, we could look at long rough. In rounds with long rough, in the past couple of years, your top good drives gained players have been Doug Gim, Andrew Putnam, Ches Reavie, Austin Eckroat, Martin Laird, Keegan Bradley, Lee Hodges, defending champion, Russell Knox, Grayson Sigg, Jim Herman. So I don't know what filter I'm going to use, if any, but I have, at least conceptually in my mind, I like the good drives gained. I would like the greens, but the problem is these greens are pretty darn easy to hit, as we saw last night. I mean, 72% green and regulation percentage. These greens just aren't difficult to hit. So I don't know how much there's going to be gained by looking at greens. I just don't think there's enough there. All right, we'll move to scoring. Get this prepped for scoring. Last year, looks like the higher raw numbers again are in the birdies. 1 player negative in bogey avoidance. Birdies gained. Birdies. It's actually a lot of these top 5s were more in the bogey avoidance. Interesting. There are a few eagles around. No doubt about that. 1st, 2nd, 5th, 7th, and then kind of falls off a little bit. 2nd, 50th, 10th. So it looks like the bogeys might be a slightly more consistent from last year. It's close. 2022 in the scoring. Bogeys, birdies, lots of birdies. Pretty even. Bogeys much more. So maybe it is the bogey avoidance. It kind of makes sense, though, with all the water in play. Eagles do happen, so we definitely want to look at birdies or better. Might be both. Might be some opportunities as well. I don't know. What do you think? Put it in comments. Put it in the chat if you're watching. Again, I just don't know how I feel about wind. The wind filter. Birdies are better and bogeys and whatnot. Don't want to look at course length. I still think this is going to play average, so looking like we're going to be focused just in the immediacy. Like, who's just been playing very, very well lately in these various metrics? I wish there was a filter I felt confident in. I just don't. I don't at the moment. So we'll start with opportunities. Your top opportunities gained players in the field the past 24 rounds. Keith Mitchell, Tom Hoge, Joel Damon, Mac Meisner, Luke Clanton, Troy Merritt, Doug Gim, Pat Gazire, Rico Hoey, Michael Thorbjornsen. We look at birdies or better. Zach Johnson, #1 birdies or better gained player in this field in the last 24 rounds. How about that? Not getting a lot of eagles, not avoiding a lot of bogeys, but he is the #1 birdie or better gained player. I color me shocked, but there it is. Luke Clanton, McNeely, Finau, Novak, Mitchell, Tom Hoge, Harry Hall, Nick Dunlap, and Chan Kim are your top 10 in birdies or better. Bogey avoidance is quite a different list because a lot of these players aren't avoiding the bogeys. Tony Finau, Billy Horschel, Sam Stevens, Rico Hoey, Harry Hall, Hayden Buckley, Sam Burns, Johnny Vegas, Ben Silverman, and Andrew Novak. So as of right now, I would probably look at both birdies or better and bogey avoidance. It'd be one of those things where it's like 5% on both because I'm not very confident in it. Let's move to proximity. Majority of the approach shots come from 175 plus. However, last night it seemed like the 125 to 150 or the shorter ranges mattered more. at least for the players who have played well here consistently year over year. Maybe the 150 to 175. That looks like it's the best from the jump here. Total procs doesn't look to be a huge factor. I mean, JT Poston was amazingly solid in total procs. Second, but look how little correlation there is there. If we look at the breakdown again, just get a quick reminder. Yeah, I mean, the majority come from 175 and beyond. Okay. If we go through these individual ranges, like Poston and Lee Hodges were very good from this range, but not a lot of correlation. Cut making other than Mark Hubbard, but A lot of miscuts here. Again, more cut making in the 200 plus, but not a whole lot. And if we're looking at 200 plus, my guess is it's just par fives. If we look at 2022, Tony Finau's win, so total procs was a pretty big deal in 2022. Again, this 150 to 175 was the most for the top 15 here. 200 plus a little bit as well. If we sort, okay, I guess. Okay, first, second, 11th, and 7th a little bit further down, but nothing jumps off the page. Miscut lead in that range, so Your winner 2 years ago led from 175 to 200, which would make sense because he's got a lot of distance. So players who might be on the borderline of 200 plus approaches, you know, he's certainly further off the tee, longer off the tee. I don't see a lot here. I just don't. I don't see a lot there. Par threes. We saw in the breakdown last night that they didn't really contribute a whole lot for your top fives, your top tens. Like, look at last year. Last year, par threes just didn't seem to matter much at all. Like, the highest I see is a 4.9 all the way down here. Lee Hodges was okay, but he wasn't exceptional at them. What you really don't see other than Billy Horschel is disasters of par threes. So maybe that's where the value in the par threes come in, is just to make sure you're okay at them. There's not a lot to be gained, it looks like. Like, your winner wasn't up here. You have a miscut. Majority of the strokes gained look like they're in these two. Okay. 2022 in par threes. Finau played them a little better, but again, you got a lot of ones and twos. There's just not a lot to be gained with these par threes, it looks like. Majority of them come in the 175 to 200, it looks like. But doesn't appear to be a lot to be gained. So maybe 5%, just thinking, forwardly to the mixed condition model. So your top par three performers in the past 3 months: Batia, Toasty, Pearson Coody, David Skins, Sam Stevens, Tony Finau, Zach Johnson, Keith Mitchell, Billy Horschel, Michael Kim. Moving to par fours, going to be a slightly different story, I'm sure. When we look at par fours, you see that we definitely have every range covered. I mean, look at the par fours there. Not a single player negative until you get to T37. So you're going to have to play these par fours well, obviously, but is there a range? It looks like the majority is in these 450 to 5. 5-2, 110. Miscut from Carl Yuan. Second, top 15, top 10. Pretty darn solid there in the 450 to 5s. And then 2022. Hey, Brobarian. Good evening. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hope you have had a good day. Running through these prior leaderboards for the 3M. Not a whole lot of consistency year over year here at TPC Twin Cities, which you can maybe expect because of all the water in play. It tends to be pretty volatile. With that said, there doesn't seem to be any one any one style or metric that has played well. Like, it's not just birdies gained. It's not just this range of proximity. Looking like it's as a statistician, I hate this. It's all over the place, really. From 2 years ago in Tony Finau, it seems like this 450 to 500 has been very, very consistent in terms of top end performance. So I think that's where I'm at with the par fours. So all ranges of par fours are going to matter. Absolutely. So your top just general par four performers: Keegan, Luke Clanton, Andrew Novak, Ryo Hitsatsune, Hayden Buckley, Hayden Springer, Dirty, Willie McGurty, Ben Griffin, Ben Silverman, and Taylor Pendrith. But it did look like the 450 to 500 was pretty darn correlating, actually. Come on, Fantasy National, you are really lagging. So we're going to clear that. I'm going to set this for all of 2024 because different courses have different setups for their par fours, 450 to 500. So just to get a good enough feel for the 450 to 5, we're going to go all rounds so long as it's been in the 2024 season. Your top par 4 performers from 450 to 500: Max Grazerman, Tom Hoagie, Akshay Bhatia, Tony Finau, Mav McNeely, Ryan Moore, Ben Coles, Rico Hoey, Keegan, and Luke Clanton. Okay. Is there a certain player that are good in clutch moments, like par 4 shorter, maybe a certain golfers are really clutch in? I think you and I have had that discussion before. If it wasn't you, it was somebody else. How do you quantify clutch? How do you quantify the mental side of it? It's very, very damn near impossible to quantify that. All we can do is just kind of look at these various ranges. That's just a very, very difficult question to answer, and if you find out a way, share it with me and we'll make a lot of money, because people have been trying to do that for a long time. Here at TBC Twin Cities, it did seem like the 450 to 5s were the ranges of par 4s that mattered the most, which actually makes, now that I think about it, it makes the most sense. That's, even though it doesn't have the most in terms of holes in its range, you look at the par 4s that are over 500, 502 and 501. So you could easily see those playing under 500 when they move tees and pins. If we look at the sub 450, 416 is probably not getting there. 424 is probably not getting there. 437 maybe. 411's not. I guess I can answer a different way. There are certain players who take advantage of big moments. Again, that's pretty subjective. What your definition of a big moment is and what mine, probably going to differ in some capacity. And it's also subjective in how big a moment is. We moved to par 5s. I'm just going to tell you right now, with all 3 par 5s measuring from 590 to 600, 594, 593, 596. You see they did play a little bit over 600, at least last year. I'm sure they did in 2022 as well. Yeah, a little bit. It's all in the 550 to 600. So your top par 5 performers from 550 to 600 yards this PGA Tour season: Tony Finau, Nick Dunlap, Bo Hostler, Keith Mitchell, Billy Horschel, Sam Burns, Mackenzie Hughes, Sahith Theegala, Akshay Bhatia, Luke Clanton, JJ Spawn. All right, so with that, let's just go to Microsoft Excel. Fantasy Nationals are really struggling tonight. We'll go to Microsoft Excel. Now that we've looked through some prior leaderboards, gotten a feel for TPC Twin Cities, and I say a feel because I'm really not terribly confident. Let's take a look and see how it has played over the years. Again, 2019 being its first year. So we have all 5 years of data here for the 3M. We see off the tee has been very, very consistent, with the exception of Tony Finau's win when it was a higher outlier, but still, I mean, almost doubling the importance of the around the green. The around the green's generally not been a big factor at all. You remove that high outlier, it falls considerably. You remove that high outlier too, it's, double. That off the tee is just double the importance of the around the green. That's why we're focused solely on the off the tee this week. I'm not looking at around the green. If we have 2 straight years where the around the green matters, then I might adjust. But last year seems to be, a little, an outlier, different than all the others. Because look at the approach. The approach is an extremely low outlier. Every one of these other years, the approach was a pretty big factor. So this was a very big. So the emphasis last year was on on the short game. Literally every other year, the prior 4, the emphasis was on the ball striking. So I'm going to go with the normal, and if it adjusts again this year, or plays to the short game, 1, I'll just be wrong, and 2, then I'll start making an adjustment, starting next year. But it looks like it's been about the ball striking, particularly with the irons. The putting has been okay. Like if we remove this, 2.47, that's like 6% more important than the average full field course. Okay. I mean, we'll probably look at fast and lightning big greens in the mixed condition model, but it's only going to be 5% because these greens aren't complicated. They're not difficult to putt. So I just want to find the players who are ball striking it well right now. Moving into fairways, greens. So we had 1 year where distance mattered not at all, and you see that's when the fairways were a lot. 3 years where the distance was a decent factor. 2020 distance was kind of meh. The greens have, pretty consistently gotten more important year over year. Okay. Good drives also gotten a little bit more important over the years. If we move over, so good drives is 1%. Greens are actually less than the average full field course. This is why I'm going to be putting a whole lot of emphasis on off the tee. Distance and fairways, both roughly 13% more important than the average full field course. So that's why just the big emphasis on off the tee this week. I'm going to be heavily weighted in off the tee compared to, some other statistics that are going to be in there. I still like good drives gained, but not sold on it. Fortunately, I've got 2 days to think about it, but I'm still leaning towards good drives. We look to scoring. Yes, the birdies gained are generally going to be the more, the higher numbers, the higher raw statistic, bigger numbers. Bogey avoidance has actually been the one that's somewhat more important. And again, there wasn't a lot in this page view I was confident in. We could look at bogey avoidance. You could look at birdies gained. All of these have some low and some high numbers, so it's just been chaotic. It's been everywhere. There's not a lot of consistency here among the birdies gained and the bogey avoidance. My lean is bogey avoidance, but it's a slight lean. Par threes. We're probably going to look at just total par threes because each one of these ranges has a good bit of data in it. Last year was the 200 to 225. But the year before that, the 200 to 225 didn't matter. In 2021, it was all in the 175 to 200, so it's just kind of chaotic. So that's why I'm just going to look at total par 3s, I think. Par 4s, you see they do shorten them. We do have 2 that play to this length here. They don't seem to provide much. Really, it's just about the par 4s. I mean, this is a big number. That's a big, big number. 17% more important than the average full field course in just par 4s. So, yeah. I know I looked at the 450 to 500. In fact, the 400 to 450 were slightly more than the 400 to 450 to 5. So we're just going to look at all of them. If you wanted to, you could argue just to look at these 3. I wouldn't blame you if you did that, but I mean, this is just such a solid, large enough number that I'm just going to look at all par 4s, and it's probably going to have a decent amount of weight like off the tee, because this is a big number. And then par 5s, pretty simple. About 80 to 85% of the par 5 strokes gained are in the 550 to 600. And you see last year, the 600 and 650 were actually negative in the strokes gained. That's all it is. It's in the 550 to 600. That's why we singled out that range of par 5. For those who might be interested, taking a quick cursory look at proximity. Total procs, no. 125 to 150, the 150 to 175 are the 2 ranges that stand out the most, or at least compared to the PGA average full field PGA course. But I didn't see a lot there when looking at the prior leaderboards, so I got nothing there for proximity. All right, let's go to the mixed condition model that I made last year for the 3M. See how it fared, results based, what I looked at, how predictive it was, and all that. So for the 3M last year, I had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of my top 20 missed the cut. A little bit too high. I'll shoot for 4 to 5. The winner, just outside my top 20, he was 21st. So, okay. He did not have a bad statistic across what I looked at. No red or pink statistics, so okay. Important to note that, I suppose. Finau, we're going to be pretty popular, top 10. Griot was popular, top 10. My unique plays, Spawn, middling, Kevin Yu, middling, So a lot of room for improvement, at least in results. At least with results. So what did I look at? 20% approach. Makes a lot of sense. Approach is just a huge metric here. Good drives gained. I looked at it when it was easy. I understand why. But I don't think that's going to be applicable this year, especially if that forecast holds, because there's a lot of wind in the forecast for Blaine as of now. So I like the good drives gained. I would definitely drop the percentage because I'm not as confident in it. I can't use that filter. Off the tee makes a lot of sense. I'm going to be using a whole lot of off the tee. Par 4s make a lot of sense. Opportunities when it's easy. Again, probably not going to be able to use that filter, but I did look at opportunities. You see I looked at just that range of par 5s. Yep. 5% in fast and lightning bent, exactly the same as I would do this year. And then 5% par 3s, exactly what I would do. So these two probably going to just come straight into this year's mixed condition model. I'm going to use this same metric, 550 to 600 par 5s, maybe up the percentage a little bit, and then I'll change it to where it's the entire year, not just last 36 rounds, since not every course has 550 to 600 par 5s. But yeah, I like that as well. The glaring omission that I see I don't have anything scoring other than opportunities. Okay. So, I didn't have any bogey avoidance and have any birdies or better game, but, you know, for as chaotic or inconsistent this course is or has played, I don't hate what I did with this last year. I don't. So how do they do in terms of predictability? Well, not great. So if we were to sort on results, meaning Lee Hodges first, JT Poston second, and on down, we had 153 players last year. So I'm looking for something in the 50s. Maybe mid 50s, but 50 to 55 is what I'm wanting in terms of predictability. The approach, not great. Good drives gained, not great, but a little bit better. Really, the only one that was predictably okay was opportunities. And I really don't like... I like the thought of using opportunities, but I won't be able to recreate it because I just don't see this playing easy unless the wind starts to die down in the forecast through the week. So that probably is another reason why the results didn't turn out well, because these weren't very predictable. The approach was fine. The good drives gained was good. Off the tee was not predictive at all. The par fives weren't predictive at all. The others were just kind of bad. Not horrendous, but just kind of bad. Par fours, putting, par threes. So definitely a lot to be improved on from last year. That is for sure. But unfortunately, I'm going to use a lot of these same metrics. I'll be changing up the filters, moving some percentages around, but really kind of the crux or the idea behind this mixed condition model, I kind of agree with. So I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, that hurt. All right. So with that, let's move to the early look file. Now that we have went through the prior leaderboards and the comparison course file, figured out what metrics in theory play best around TBC Twin Cities, let's see who has done the best at those particular metrics in the 5 years here at TBC Twin Cities. So, since 2019, since the inaugural 3M Open, your top off the tee players at TBC Twin Cities have been Sam Burns. Callum Tarren's been very good. Look at this. Callum Tarren, 2 for 2, only 2 times, but if you're a big believer in course history, like, he's been great off the tee, he's been really good with the irons, he's been great on the greens. Okay. Doug Gim, 3 for 4. Excellent off the tee here. His irons actually haven't been very good. But like I say, every tournament, when you have a bad putter, but the best example I can give of this is Hideki. When you look at a bad putter and they're gaining strokes on those greens, Hideki at the Genesis is always the example. You've got to pay attention. Doug Gim is not a good putter. He's gaining strokes here at TPC Twin Cities across a lot of events. Keith Mitchell, his putting is atrocious. He's gaining 4.5 strokes on average, each of those 4 years. You've got to pay attention to that. Tony Finau's another one. We'll do this with the putting, sure, but because it's sort of off the tee. But anytime you have a bad putter and they show that they like those greens, you've got to pay attention. Emiliano Grillo, somebody you just got to pay attention to. So anyway, there's your top off the tee performers at TPC Twin Cities in the 5 years that we've seen the 3M. Let's look at the irons. Lee Hodges, defending champion, he's averaging gaining 9 strokes on approach. Granted, that is his game. He's a ball striker, but I mean, that's just video game numbers. Kevin Streelman's been good with the irons here. Tony Finau, strokes gained total leader by miles. You see, he's been very good at basically everything here. Tom Hoagie, again, kind of his game, but still, he's actually gaining strokes a little bit on these greens. Johnny Vegas. Josh Teeter. Leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of finish, but he's hit his irons well here. Cam Davis. Callum Tarrant, who we mentioned. JT Poston. Adam Long has hit his irons very well here. Putting. Your top putters at TPC Twin Cities. JT Poston. Again, you can look at these three, but that's only been one time, so I kind of skip over them because it's such a small sample size. JT Poston, 3 times. He's gained averaged 5, basically. Kelly Craft, Dylan Wu, Keith Mitchell's gaining 4.5. Aaron Baddeley, granted, I mean, he's a short game player, but he's putt well here. James Hahn, a little bit less in terms of finish, but he's putt well here. Cam Champ. Cam Champ is not a good putter, so be aware of that. Cam Champ is not a good putter, and he is gained here. Hadwin, he's a really good putter, so it makes a lot of sense. Bo Hostler. Wallace only twice. Sam Ryder's putt well here a little bit. So here's your top putters at TPC Twin Cities. We're gonna skip the driving. We're gonna skip the scoring. Let's just go straight to the par 4s. We saw that these 3 Rangers are the main ones, but really it's just all par 4s. JT Poston again. There's Lee Hodges. Callum Tarrant, Tony Finau. Cam Davis. Streelman, Tom Hoagie, Keith Mitchell. Keegan's 2 for 2. Sam Burns is 2 for 2. Ryder, Long. Okay. 550 to 600 par 5s is how we'll finish this. Your top par 5 performance from 550 to 6 here. Matty Schmitz only wants MJ Duffy. 2 for 2. A little bit less in terms of finish, but 2 for 2. Luke List, you want to talk about a guy that can't putt. Luke List, still not putting well here, but somebody to think about if we're going to be emphasizing the ball striking. Lee Hodges, Sam Burns, Griot again, Patrick Rogers, 3 for 3. Okay. Party Marty Laird, Mackenzie Hughes, Novak. Matthew Neesmith's been good on the par 5s, but leaves a lot to be desired in terms of finish. All right. I'll bring this back to the best average finish. I know I didn't post this to social media. I mentioned how there wasn't a lot to kind of correlate these past winners, but I will show you where I stopped, essentially, because I just couldn't get it narrowed down. Let's first look at the winner matrix. So part of the problem with TPC Twin Cities is that it hasn't been seen for very many years. So Matthew Wolff, of course, nobody had seen the course, at least in competitive play, before Matthew Wolff, so you can't factor that in. Michael Thompson made the cut in 2019 before he won in 2020. Cam Champ missed the cut, didn't play, and then wins. Now, Finau's been fantastic here, and Hodges was very good before he won. So if you wanted to get technical about it, you could say that 3 of the 4 at least had made the cut the previous time they had played TPC Twin Cities before winning, but that just doesn't feel very limiting. Now the past 2 champions have at least a top 20, but there's just not a lot of data here to really hammer home a pattern, at least of prior performance at TPC Twin Cities. If we look at the most recent event of the champions before coming to the 3M, Lee Hodges last year missed the cut at the Open. Tony Finau finished in the top 30 at the Open. The other 3 didn't play the Open. So take that for what you will. 2 players positive and off the tee, 2 players positive in approach. Something to think about these two tournaments are pure bent, and there was a decent amount of strokes gained there. Maybe something to think about is look at the players' previous bent performance. So the most recent pure bent performance would be the ISCO, then the John Deere, then the Charles Schwab, maybe? I'd have to double check. But, those are three very recent pure bent grass tournaments. You can see if the player you're thinking about, either in your lineup or in a wager, how they putt on that surface. Something to think about. This is why I think distance and just off the tee in general is going to matter, because 4 of the 5 players were positive in distance the tournament before playing the 3M. But the last thing I'll show you, and this was the most limiting criteria that I could get. Look at recent form of these champions coming into the 3M. You see Lee Hodges last year had a couple of top 15s and another top 25. So T12, T12, and a top 25. It's decent. Not great, but decent. Tony Finau, one of the elite players in the game, so he's going to have a lot more top 10s and stuff, but he at least had some top 15s. Even Cam Champ had a top 15 at the John Deere, the tournament before the 3M, before we won the 3M. 2020, now it's escaping me who that was. Michael Thompson. He had a top 10. All the way back to the RBC Heritage, but that was still the month prior. So in the 2 months prior to the 3M, 2 months, where essentially it's a soft cutoff of June 1st, roughly. Couple of top 15s. Go back to June 1st. I'll go to May 29th, sure. Several top 15s. Even Cam Champ had a top 15. Michael Thompson had a top 15. That was the most limiting metric that I could, or pattern that I could see. It only narrowed it down to 50 players. So there's just not a lot there. Just not a lot there. But those are the 50 players that have a top 15 within the past couple of months. So I definitely didn't want to leave you all hanging on that research, but I'll bring us back to the best average finish historically at the 3M. That's going to be it for the show this evening. Thanks, Barbarian, for jumping in chat. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at sports statistics, giving you a statistician, data analyst view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Some weeks better than others. Past 2 weeks, hopefully, have been very good for you, as they've been very good for me. But the 3 or 4 weeks preceding that weren't very good. So I will say I'm on a mini heater. I can't call it a heater unless it's 3 or 4 weeks in a row. But on a mini heater right now, we're going to try to keep the momentum going for the 3M this week. Thanks again for all the support. For all the wagers you've made so far this week for the 3M Open. For all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the 3M Open. And until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.